Okay, I think it's safe to say we all know the story of Noah's Ark, right? I mean, who hasn't seen that image of all the cute animals marching two by two onto this giant boat?
Yeah, it's definitely a classic.
It is. But we're going to go a little deeper today, beyond just the animals and the flood, you know? Like, what are the deeper messages in this ancient story?
Right.
The ideas about faith and resilience and hope that still resonate even thousands of years later.
Yeah, what's so interesting about the story is it really starts with this picture
Yeah.
of a world that's really falling apart, like rampant wickedness, just total despair. It's like society has completely lost its way.
Hmm. Almost like a reflection of some of our own anxieties today,
Yeah.
right? Like when it feels like things are just off kilter.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Noah comes in, this kind of
Yeah.
ordinary guy who gets this really extraordinary task, right? Build an ark when it's never even rained before.
Okay, but wait, hold on. Isn't that a little dangerous?
Yeah.
Like to just blindly trust something like that? I mean, what if someone told you today, hey, build a giant spaceship because aliens are going to invade? You probably want a little more proof than that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And the story really grapples with that. Like, just imagine what it would have been like for Noah. Everyone around him thinking he's completely lost it. But maybe that's the point, right? It makes us ask ourselves, what would it take for me to trust something that completely? To step outside of my comfort zone and embrace something radically different?
That's a good point. And even beyond the faith aspect, think about the sheer logistics involved. Building a boat that massive, gathering all those animals, it's mind-boggling.
It's really hard to wrap your head around.
Did Noah ever have second thoughts like, wait a minute, am I the crazy one here?
We can only imagine. But what the story focuses on is his unwavering commitment. He doesn't let the doubts or the ridicule deter him from his purpose.
So it's not just about believing, it's about actually doing something about it.
Exactly. It's faith in action. Noah isn't passively waiting around. He's building a solution.
And that solution, the ark itself, becomes so much more than just a boat. It's like this symbol of safety, of preservation, of life continuing even when everything else is falling apart.
Yeah, it's like a little microcosm of the world itself. And it makes you think about the arcs that we build in our own lives. You know, the things we rely on to get us through tough times.
The relationships we cherish, the communities we belong to, the values that guide us.
Exactly. What are those things for you? What helps you navigate the choppy waters of life?
That's a good question. I'd say it's those people in my life who are always there for me, no matter what. They're like my anchor, you know,
Yeah,
always keeping me grounded.
that's beautiful. And it gets to the heart of why this story is so enduring. It speaks to that deep human need for connection, for belonging, for that sense of security in a world that can feel so chaotic and unpredictable.
But even with that support system, Noah still faces so much resistance. I mean, imagine trying to explain this whole arc thing to your neighbors.
Yeah, so it's going to rain forever. Trust me.
Oh, I can only imagine the looks he must have gotten. And that's what really makes his story so powerful, right? That unwavering commitment, even when everyone thinks he's crazy.
Absolutely. He's a true testament to the power of resilience. And it makes us think, what are the things in our own lives that require that kind of unwavering commitment?
What are the arcs we're called to build, even if they seem impossible to those around us?
Yeah, and that's a question we'll continue to explore as we dive deeper into this story. Like, what about the flood itself? What does that represent? What does it teach us about destruction and renewal? And what about that covenant, that new agreement between God and humanity?
Yeah, lots to unpack there. So we were talking about Noah and how he just keeps going even when nobody believes in him. But then the flood actually hits, right?
It does, and it's easy to focus on the scale of it, right?
Yeah.
Like 40 days and 40 nights of rain. It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah, but it makes you wonder if there's something deeper going on there. Like, what does the flood really represent?
What's interesting is that it's not just about destruction. It's also a powerful symbol of renewal, almost like wiping the slate clean and making way for something new.
So it's like, yeah, it's punishment, but it's also a chance to start fresh.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that sometimes things have to end to make way for new beginnings.
Yeah. I can see that. We see it in our own lives too, right? Like going through a major life change, it can be really tough, but it can also lead to incredible growth.
Right. Losing a job or a relationship,
Yeah.
those things can be devastating, but they can also force us to reevaluate and ultimately lead us to something better.
I'm also curious about the timing of the flood. Why 40 days and 40 nights? Is there something special about that number?
Well, it does show up a lot in religious texts. It often seems to represent a period of transition or testing, like the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years, or Jesus fasting in the wilderness for 40 days. It's like this symbolic threshold that you have to cross to reach a new level of understanding.
So it's not just a random amount of time, it's more about this idea of a transformative journey.
Exactly. And that journey, as the story shows, isn't always easy. Imagine being stuck on that ark for 40 days and 40 nights. Even with your family, it would be intense.
Yeah, that would really test your resilience, wouldn't it?
It would. And that's another key takeaway from the story. Resilience isn't just about being tough. It's about having the inner strength to get through difficult situations.
So it's not just about the physical arc, right? It's about having those internal resources that help us weather our own personal storms.
It's about adapting and being creative and finding ways to hold on to hope, even when things feel really uncertain.
So we're building arcs on multiple levels, physical, emotional, even spiritual.
Exactly. And that's how we not only survive, but thrive even when things are tough.
Okay. But eventually the flood does end, the ark lands, and Noah sends out a dove and it comes back with an olive branch. What's the significance of that moment?
It's really the beginning of a new era, a time of peace and rebuilding.
It's such a powerful image, that olive branch. It represents hope, right?
It does. It's a promise of a fresh start.
But it's not just about the physical world recovering. I feel like there's a deeper shift in the relationship between God and humanity, too.
You're right. That's where the covenant comes in.
That sounds pretty significant. What does that mean exactly? Like, what is a covenant and how does it apply to us today?
That's a great question, and I think it deserves a deeper look.
So we've been talking about this flood as a sort of cosmic reset button, right? Like wiping everything clean and starting over. And then there's this idea of a covenant, this new agreement between God and humanity. And feels like that's where the really important stuff is.
What's really fascinating about the covenant is that it represents a shift. Before the flood, it was all about judgment, right? Like humanity just wasn't living up to its potential. But after the flood, it becomes about hope and promise.
So it's like, okay, let's try this again, but this time let's do it differently.
Exactly. It's like a chance for a do-over, a chance to rebuild that relationship between God and humanity, but on a different foundation.
Yep. Okay, but how does that translate to our lives today? I mean, we can't exactly expect a rainbow to appear every time we mess up, right?
Right. But the rainbow is still so powerful. It reminds us that even after really terrible times, there's always the possibility of something beautiful emerging.
So it's about looking for those rainbows in our own lives.
Yeah, those moments that remind us that even when things are tough, there's still good in the world. Like a random act of kindness or a moment of deep connection with nature, those little glimmers of hope.
Yeah, and sometimes it's those small things that really make a difference, don't they?
They do. And noticing them, holding on to them, that's how we kind of keep that spirit of the covenant alive in our own lives.
It's like when you're facing a problem and it feels impossible, and then suddenly you see things differently, like a new path opens up or someone offers to help and you realize, okay, I can do this.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that sense of hope, remembering that things can and do change, and also remembering that we're not alone. Just like the covenant was made with all of humanity, we're all in this together. We have a responsibility to each other, to the planet, to future generations.
It's a pretty amazing thought when you think about it. All those connections, those ripple effects, our actions really do matter.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to those arcs we were talking about. Not just the ones we build for ourselves, but the ones we build for our communities, for the values we believe in, for the kind of world we want to leave behind.
So it's not just about individual hope, it's about a collective hope. Like we're all working together to make the world a better place.
Exactly. And what a legacy that is, right? To contribute to something bigger than ourselves, to help create a world where hope thrives and where everyone has a chance to flourish.
You know, it's amazing how the story that's thousands of years old can still feel so relevant today.
It really is.
We're facing some pretty big challenges in the world right now, and it can be hard to stay positive sometimes.
Yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, what can I possibly do that will make a difference?
But Noah's story reminds us that even when things seem impossible, there's always hope.